Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to this meeting. It's a pleasure me to welcome you to this webinar as part of the activities of Work Package 11 and 12. We will present today the ENVRI-Hub privacy policy. It has been designed to be fully compliant with the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation. And as you know, as the ENVRI-Hub continues to evolve as a central access point for data and services, ensuring the protection of data and maintaining transparency are essential. So today's session will walk you through the principles, the structure, and also practical implication of this privacy policy. And it will show you how it supports both legal compliance and user trust. So we look forward to your questions, feedback. We hope the webinar provides insights into our commitment to responsible data governance. I would leave the floor to Chen from EGI. She will present the ENVRI-Hub privacy policy, and then we will have a session for question and answer for discussion. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Chen from EGI Foundation, where I worked as a Senior Community Support Officer. Before we start, I want to be clear, I'm not a lawyer. What I will share today is based on GDPR training prepared by EGI Data Protection Officer, also my own study of Horizon Europe regulation and lessons from related project. And my role here is to make this legal and regulatory requirement easier to be understood and more practical for us in ENVRI-Hub NEXT. The aim today is to give our community a clear picture of what is expected and how we can handle GDPR in our day-to-day work. If any detailed legal question coming up, I may need to follow up afterwards. But the focus of today's session is to give you a solid practical foundation so we can move forward with confidence in the meeting of our GDPR responsibility. And here what we will cover today, a short introduction to GDPR and why it matters to us, a specific GDPR requirement for Horizon Europe project, finally, how we address GDPR in our project, focusing on our privacy policy and agreements. And the picture note, I copy from the training, and the picture looks a little bit blurred from my side. Sorry about this. And the General Data Protection Regulation, and the short for GDPR, it came into effect in 2018. It is a landmark European law designed to protect the individual's personal data and privacy right. And it ensures principles like lawfulness, fairness, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, storage limitation, and integrity and confidentiality. In a simple term, GDPR tells us only collect what you need, use it for clear purpose, secure it properly, and always inform people clearly. And yes, and when we talk about GDPR, it is help us to ground ourselves in a few key definitions. And here is the very important concept of data subject. And it's just the person whose personal data is being processed. For us, it can be a researcher, a student, or a service operator. Someone is identifiable if we can recognize them through their data. And directly means if we can recognize through their data like name or email, or indirectly, like if we recognize them through their IP address or mix of different details. Personal data. This is any information that point to a person. It is not only name and emails, it can also be the login time, which institution someone belong to, or technical identifier passing through login. If the information can be linked back to a person, to a real person, it is personal data. Processing. This covers almost anything we do with personal data. It's not just storing it. It is in collecting, organizing, sharing, using, or even deleted. All of this count as processing. In other words, from the moment we first collected personal data until we finally delete it, every step in between is processing under GDPRs. I hope it's clear now. And another three important concept, profiling. This is when personal data is used automatically to guess or predict things about a person, like their habit, preference, or even where they are. In ENVRI-Hub NEXT, we don't use profiling, but it's important to know them because if we ever did, it would require stricter safeguards. The controller is very important and related to us. The controller is the organization that decides why and how data is used. They set the purpose, why data is collected, and the method, how it's stored or shared. And the processor handles personal data, but only by follow the controller's instruction. For example, if ENVRI provide a wiki service to a project and the project stores personal data there, then the project is the controller and ENVRI is the processor. And controller, we can think of like a captain of a ship. They decide where the ship is going, the purpose of processing, and how it will get there. And the processor is like the crew of the ship. They don't decide the destination. They simply follow the captain's instruction. Under GDPR, the captain and the crew don't share the similar responsibility. The captain and the controller carry main responsibility where processor must follow the rules set for them. Another key part of the GDPR is supervisory authority. Every European country has one. For example, in Netherlands is the Dutch Data Protection Authority. In France is the CNIL. Italy, the Italian Data Protection Authority. In Sweden is the ENVRI. And these authorities are GDPR referees. They check if organizations are playing by the rule, and they can step in if something goes wrong. They can also investigate complaints and even apply fines. For our project in ENVRI-Hub NEXT, this means if a user feels their data right were not respected, they don't have to stop with us. They can take their case to their own national supervisory authorities. And there are probably some noise that come from my machines running crazy about to change. And principle that at the heart of the GDPR are 6 key principles. Think of them as the gold rule for handling personal data. And lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. that we must always follow the law and treat people fairly and be clear about what we do with their data. For example, when someone logs in with an ENVRI ID, we should explain openly what we collect their name, email, and login records, and say why we do that. Nothing should be hidden. Purpose limitation. Data can only be used for the reason it was collected. For example, if we collect in login data for authentication, we cannot later use it for research profiling or other unrelated purpose. And data minimization. Only collect the data we actually needed. For example, if an ENVRI ID should ask for essential information like email and application, not extra personal detail, just in case in later use. No, we shouldn't do that. Accuracy. Data must be correct and keep up to date. For example, if the user changed their institution email, our system should be updated, and old or wrong data should not stay active. Storage limitation. We cannot keep personal data forever. It should only stay as long as needed for the purpose. For example, logging logs may be used for security, but we may set a rule like delete after 12 months. Yes, and integrity and confidentiality, and data must be protected from misuse, loss, or unauthorized access. For example, in our project, if this means in encryption, access control, and only let trusted service provider handle data. Just one, and just these 6 principles. These 6 principles are basically the foundation of GDPR. If we keep them in mind, we are almost halfway to compliance. And the right of the data subject, the persons who this the core part of the GDPR is the set of rule it gives to the people, the data subject, who we process in their data. Our responsibility is to make sure this right can be used easily and transparently. Right of access. Anyone can ask what personal data we have about them and how we use them. Right of rectification. If their data is wrong or outdated, they can ask us to fix it. Right to erasure, the right to be forgotten. People can ask to delete their data when it's no longer needed or what was collected in the wrong way. Right to restrict the processing. They can ask us to stop using their data, but still allow us to keep it for records. Right to data portability. People can ask for their data in a format they can take to another service. Right to object. They can say no to certain type of processing, like receiving marketing emails. Right not to be subject to automated decision or profiling. People can refuse decision made only by machine that significant affect them. And for ENVRI-Hub NEXT, this means we must be ready to answer if a user asks, what data do you have about me? Can you update it? And can you delete it? And GDPR Data Protection Officer, and in the GDPR recital 97 says the DPO and data protection officer is a person with expert knowledge of the data protection law and practice who help controller and processing complying with GDPR. Their role is to assist the compliance and help organizations avoid risk when processing personal data. And a data protection officer can be internal and external. And their main task is as a contact point for data protection question for public and for staff, monitor complaints and give advice on EGI matters. And it's not always required, but if not, the organization must be able to justify to the authority. For example, if there very little personal data is processed or no sensitive data like legal or health data at all, only a small number of data people involved, something like that. And in EGI, we have our DPO and can reach that at the DPO at egi.eu. Per you, probably each organization you have your own DPO. You can always contact for GDPR issue. And so that's a very short introduction of the foundational concept and principle of GDPR. And then the second part, we come to the GDPR requirement for Horizon Europe. And the Horizon Europe, GDPR compliance is not optional. It is written directly into the model grant agreement. In the Article 39, it says, the beneficiary must process personal data in compliance with applicable European and national law on data protection, including GDPR. This means GDPR apply to almost everything we do in a project. For example, the research that involve human participants, registration system like emailing list or event setup, authentication system such as ENVRI-ID, and even everyday data like names, email, or IP address. In a short, if a personal data is involved, the GDPR rule applies. Obligation to protecting data subject as a beneficiary, as European Horizon European beneficiary, we all have a clear responsibility. We handle personal data, processing data lawfully, fairness, and transparently, provide privacy notice, and tell people how their data is being used in plain language, and respect the user's right. For example, if someone asks to see, correct, or delete their data, we must respond. And so this is a law, is a regulation, is not something we can ignore. Data protection in the data management plan. Another key GDPR requirement is to including data protection in the data project's data management plan. For any project to handle data, scientific or personal, the data management plan must clearly explain what data is collected and why, who the data controller is, how the data is secured, and how long data is kept, and when it will be deleted. This again, is not a box-ticking exercise. A Horizon reviewer and auditor pay close attention to them. So it's very important to be precise and transparent. Ethic and DPO, data protection officer involvement. And GDPR is always tied to the ethic processing at Horizon Europe. This means that during the proposal and project execution, we may need to answer ethic questions about how we handle personal data, take part in an ethic review panel, providing proof of compliance, for example, privacy policies or contact detail of a data protection officer. And if our project processes data on a large scale or involves sensitive data, then each partner may need to bring in their own institution data protection officer to make sure everything is covered. Non-compliance risk. Why compliance matters? Non-compliance with GDPR is not a series that have a real consequence. Auditor or review may reject our work. Funding can be suspended or reduced, and there can be a legal liability, including fines. So, and GDPR compliance is not only about law, it's about protecting the project integrity and financial sustainability. And the last part is GDPR compliance for ENVRI-Hub NEXT. And we prepare a GDPR compliance checklist. This is a practical way to make sure we cover all key requirements. And the first step is to identify all the personal data we use across our service. Then we need to clearly define who the data controller and for each component, for example, ENVRI ID or the data catalog, who is the controller and who is the processor. And in some case, we may also need a joint controller agreement. I will come back later. And every partner should have either a data protection officer or at least a GDPR contact person. And of course, each service should have a published privacy policy. And GDPR also need to be part of a data management plan, not an afterthought, but as an integrated element. Alongside that, we should maintain a register of processing activities. Basically, it's a record of what data is used by whom and for what purpose. We need a clear retention policy, for example. How long log or user account are kept before being deleted, and we must document our lawful basis for processing data, such as user consent or legitimate interest. And documentation. Yes, finally, we need to explain user right clearly, and to make sure our security and access control are up to standard, and inform user properly if we use cookie, or also means we have a proper cookie notice. Privacy policy is one of the most important tools for GDPR compliance and transparency. It should explain in clear language what personal data is collected, why it's collected and how it's used, and who processed the data and how long the data is kept, and what user right have and how they can have exercise them. For ENVRI-Hub NEXT, have a very clear privacy policy. It's essential because we run federated service across multiple partners. A joint controller agreement. Why we need a joint controller agreement? In ENVRI-Hub, the service we built, like ENVRI ID and the service catalog, belong to the consortium as a whole. But under GDPR, a data controller must be a legal entity or natural person because they carry the legal responsibility for how data is processed. Since no single party can carry this responsibility alone for service we built together in ENVRI-Hub NEXT, the recommendation solution supported by EGI Data Protection Officer is to put in place a joint controller agreement. This agreement is important because it is a clear document who does what with personal data and share the legal responsibility in a transparent way, show auditor and user that we take complaints seriously, and also prevent confusion if there are even a data breach or complaint. And we also explore any alternatively, and their approach like a controller processing agreement. And if it is suitable, if one party decide the purpose and other only process data on their behalf. For example, in our case of ENVRI-ID, EGI could act as a controller, while GrandNet, which operating ENVRI-ID, could act as a processor. The advantage of this model is a legal simpler as long as the hierarchical is clear, but the important drawback, first, it doesn't work well if multiple parties are involved in deciding what data to collect or how to use it. And we are also is actually also is the case in our project. We are together to make the decision on this case. And secondly, if we really want this model, the consortium would need a formal delegation or decision-making authority to EGI. And the tricky part is this delegation also need to be explicit and documented. Without explicit delegation, and GDPR could consider the party as still consider us as a joint controller. So it's still need a agreement with everyone to have this delegation. And another model, independent controller. Each organization handle its own data and policy independently. Each simpler, but it's not realistic for federated platform like ENVRI-Hub NEXT. So we give this comparison. We considered final summary recommendation is still use this joint controller agreement method, and is more safe and best for the federated service, and is fully GDPR compliant. Yes, and so we also already prepared a draft version of this joint controller agreement, and for you to review. And yes, we need to also agree, and in later step, in the next step, we need to work on this, agree with this. This is my final slides, and in conclusion, GDPR compliance is not merely box-ticking exercise. It's a shared responsibility that ensure we protect user data, uphold trust, and meet legal obligation under Horizon Europe. By working together on privacy policy, joint controller agreement, and robust data practices, we strengthen our project as a reliable and ethical infrastructure for environmental research. And thank you very much. That's my slides.